Justify. Prove to be right or reasonable. Justification is at the heart of all legal and political argument. But at a time when argument itself is slave to appearances, it is time to bring back a culture of justification. Justify, a podcast on law and politics in India from the Vidhi Center for Legal Policy, hosted by Orgho Sengupta.
Hello, everyone. A very happy new year. Hope you had a great start to the year. And we are back with episode 5 of season 2 of Justify. This one's titled India's War on Weed. Over the past few months, the Narcotics Control Bureau has been in the news for its investigations in drug related cases in Bombay. Shockingly, it now appears that unlike MDMA and cocaine, which is what we thought were commonplace amongst the rich and famous in Bollywood, it's the humble ganja that seems to be the poison of choice. And that too in really small quantities. I saw that comedian Bharti Singh was arrested with 86.5 grams of cannabis in her possession. Shabana Saeed, wife of producer Firoz Nadiadwala, was actually arrested with 10 grams. We have all been in college campuses in India where ganja use was rampant. In fact, in certain parts of the country, the cannabis plant grows widely. The easy availability of cannabis means that it is no surprise that its use is recorded in ancient Indian scripture. After all, we are all familiar with Lord Shiv, who is said to have planted the first cannabis plant in India. Far from being illegal, it was an accepted part of life in the country, still common in any congregation of rishis and munis. So, what happened to us from worshipping gods and respecting sannyasis who smoke charas to arresting persons with 10 grams of ganja in their possession? How did we get here? And where do we go from here? To chat about this, I have two very special guests, Neha Singhal and Naveed Ahmed, my colleagues at Vidhi, who have co authored a brilliantly researched paper titled Criminalization Leads to Exploitation, the Mumbai story no one knows about. It's a very different story from the Bollywood drug story that we've been seeing in the press lately. Neha has also authored a path-breaking piece of work on drug abuse in Punjab titled From Addict to Convict, which is a must-read for more serious scholars. Welcome to the show, Neha and Naveed. It's a real pleasure to have you.
Hi, Orgo. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Orgo.
So, Neha, tell us, let's start with you. I was just looking at the National Survey on Extent and Pattern of Substance Use, which was put out by the Ministry of Social Justice. And it says that between the age of 10 to 75, there are 3.1 crore people who are current users of cannabis.
Yes.
So, is the National Narcotics Control Bureau going to arrest 3 crore people?
So this is actually a very interesting question, and something seems to have happened in 2020 where the NCB seems to have gone after cannabis users in the big way. This wasn't something that they did earlier. In fact, these your sources tell you that cannabis really wasn't on their agenda at all ever. Something Sushant Singh Rajput seems to have triggered something in people where cannabis has become a thing within the NCB. But what does happen is that the police really does go after cannabis users in bursts. I think when they need to up their arrest numbers, cannabis users are easy people to go after. This was a trend that was seen specifically in Bombay, but I think other cities are also catching on. And of course, they're not going to go after 3 crore people. They're going to go after the most marginalized or whoever is going to catch the limelight or whoever's going to be interesting at that particular point. But other than that, no, of course not. They're not going to go after 3 crore people. Most people who smoke can smoke in peace, I assume.
Okay, so that's actually, I know our episode has a number of listeners who are in college campuses who might be uh, listening to this episode with closer attention than others. So that will be some comfort that it's not as if 3 crore people are being arrested. But let's come to the law. Because we've all grown up thinking that drugs are a bad thing. As in, there
Mhm.
was always smoking and alcohol, but because there was a grandfather or a mother who was smoking or drinking, it kind of seemed less bad than drugs did. So, le- as far as the law is concerned, Naveed, can you tell us a little bit about the Narcotics, Drugs, and Psychotropic Substances Act? Can I be arrested if I am, either smoking ganja or having bhang? What is the legal position?
So, the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act, enacted in 1985, basically prohibits all sorts of activities in relation to narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, including cannabis, which is ganja and charas. So you could be prosecuted if you're found smoking. If you could be prosecuted if any cannabis is found on you, and you could go to jail for 6 months for that. And it depends on how much quantity is found on you, and then the punishments can change and vary
So
according to
Neha's point that smokers seem to be safe is a practical point, that it's unlikely that the police will go after everybody, but as per law, it is a violation to be smoking ganja and you can be in jail for 6 months. Is that what you're saying?
Of course, Section 27 prohibits consumption and possession of ganja. And data tells us that around 80,000 cases have been registered under the NDPS Act last year, and 60,000 of them have basically been consumers.
All right, so that's actually pretty large numbers. But tell us how this works, because I am not an expert in this area. But as in, I was at a mela a few years back, and I remember seeing a group of sadhus smoking on their chillams. I have partaken in some holy parties where bhang has been consumed. So, how is this operating? Because obviously, cannabis use is entrenched in socio-cultural practices in India, and so people are consuming charas and having bhang. But here you are saying that there are 80,000 cases that are being registered. So I sense some degree of contradiction. Neha, can you help us in
So
resolving this?
bhang is not a criminal. Consuming or possession of bhang is not a criminal offense under the NDPS Act. Charas and ganja is. So your holy parties are safe. That even legally one should not get into trouble for. As in for chillums or smoking weed, I think what happens is that a lot of it's culturally acceptable in a lot of parts in UP, right? I think you're talking about Banaras and the chillam smoking sadhus in Banaras. Your local police is unlikely to actually go after these people because your local police is ultimately a part of the local fabric, and it's come they're a part of they I think all people there consume cannabis in some form or the other, so they're unlikely to go after these people in practical day-to-day life. The Bombay study tells you that the police tends to go after users, and in this case, cannabis users, only when there is some political pressure on top. Political pressure only asks for numbers of arrests in that particular city. It doesn't matter what people are being arrested for. What Section 27, what Naveed mentioned, does is that it makes arrest of people very easy. There is no procedural requirement for arrest and conviction. So the police just went after, I think in around 2014-15, the Fadnavis government had this urge to up its conviction and arrest rates, and they just used the easiest law in force or at the time to go after people. And if you don't have the political pressure, likely the police is not going to trouble you. But yes, if tomorrow you have this urgent need to up arrest numbers, it's a very high possibility that you might go after cannabis. But so law allows it, but the
But
police
tell us a little bit more about this Bombay study that you did, because one statistic that I found quite interesting was the fact that amongst the 180 people who responded with their occupations, these were people who had been arrested. It seemed that a large proportion were essentially working class people. I have the numbers. You have said 50 were laborers, 19 were rickshaw drivers, 15 were in a catering job. So it seems that a large number of those who were arrested seem to be working class people. So can you tell us a little bit more about your study, especially because it really goes against the grain of what we've been hearing in the news, that is basically Bollywood, which is the den of ganja in Bombay.
What you hear in the news is what people want to read, right? It's glamorous to have it's everybody wants to know about Deepika Padukone being interrogated by the NCB and what she's wearing and where she was at that time. um, but what nobody wants to know about is a rickshaw puller or a laborer getting arrested and convicted for cannabis consumption. This is not a story that's going to interest anybody. So the actual bulk of the people who are making it into the system are the marginalized. These are people who are usually found consuming. These are not even people who are found in possession of cannabis, actually. It's just people who are found using or smoking cannabis at night. They're arrested by the police. They are taken to the local hospital. The doctor checks that this person looks intoxicated. They don't even know intoxication with what. They convince this person to plead guilty, and the person pleads guilty before the court, and he's convicted there and then, and the case is over. Now, this is not an interesting story for the journalist to tell, I suppose. So it's not, Bollywood, I'm sure, uses drugs in some form or the other, and it must be high use. But the cases that are making into the system are not of Bollywood celebrities, it is of these people. And from my sense, drug consumption is ubiquitous across different strata of society. It's just about who you decide to focus on at that particular time.
So, Naveed, can you tell us a little bit more about the Bombay study, what you found?
Bombay's study tells us that it was somewhere around 2014, as Neha said, that the government felt that increasing conviction rates gives a better impression of how the criminal justice system is basically functioning. And until 2013, you were having around 3,000 cases registered under the NDPS Act, and suddenly it goes up to 14,000. And in 2016, 15, it goes up to 19,000 cases. And when we looked into what kind of cases are these, we came to know that all of these cases, around 97%, 98%, are cases of personal consumption. And then when we got data from the district magistrate courts in Bombay, all of these cases mostly are the cannabis consumption cases. Now, as Neha said, that we have all of these members from the marginalized sections getting arrested from the roads in Bombay. They live on the footpaths, they live in slums, and they get pushed into jail because of that. What was very interesting was that most of these people plead guilty upon being produced before the court. And somewhere or the other, the judicial process seems to be a little questionable, because whenever a person gets arrested for supposed consumption of a drug, the person will be taken to a medical practitioner. The medical practitioner will determine whether or not the person is under the influence and of what drug, because that is very important to determine punishments under the Act. And unless that is done, a judicial mind cannot be applied and provisions of the NDPS Act cannot take course. So what happens in Bombay is that a medical practitioner will tell the police that, all right, upon preliminary medical assessment, this person is under influence. And for actual determination of under what influence of what drug, a urine test or a blood test will have to be done, which will of course take 2-3 days. But what happens in Bombay is that this person is taken to the court, he pleads guilty, is convicted on the same day, and gets a fine of rupees 500, 600, or a day's imprisonment in court.
But that day's imprisonment or 500 rupees may be actually a fairly big amount for a daily wage laborer, right? So,
I'd
Yeah.
like to just add, it's not just a 500, 600 rupee fine. It's also sometimes depending on which court it is. And so the fines range from anywhere 100 rupees to 8,000 rupees. So it's not just a 500, 600 rupee fine for a laborer, which of course would be a big deal for a laborer, but it could go up to 8,000 rupees. And in default of that, you'd get 7 days, 8 days imprisonment. So it's crazy the amount of money they could end up spending or being fined.
so you're essentially saying that one fine day the government decided that it wants to go after cannabis users, and suddenly the number of arrests increase, and these arrests are typically that of poor people. So, but you've also, different studies, and you found that the government of Sikkim has taken a very different approach, and they've completely gone in the other way and not criminalized this at all. So, could you tell us a little bit about the different approach taken by Sikkim?
I'll take a lead on this, and I think Naveed can add inputs to this. Basically, the Sikkim Act, it's Sikkim Anti-Drugs Act, SADA. It follows the NDPS approach in almost all aspects except one, where it has decriminalized drug use entirely. The thing with SADA is that it only operates on pharmaceutical drugs. So, like your alprazolam, I don't know the drugs that nitrazepam. So I don't know what the drugs are, but these are the substances that are banned under SADA. Decriminalization happened over a years of sustained advocacy by civil society, and the civil society and your ex-addicts and people who formed a part of this, they campaigned with society, with the local people, with the government, with the judiciary, and everybody came to this consensus that it's best to decriminalize drug use because these people will not get better by being sent to jail. What that has done is that it's a far more empathetic society. From your jail authorities to your police authorities to judges, everybody is far more sympathetic and willing to integrate ex-addicts into their mainstream lives. So the judicial officers, their caterers are all ex-addicts. They know your ex-addicts and by name, like they know how to get to them. The police knows that the person before them is likely an addict and not a peddler, so to send him to de-addiction rather than sending him to jail. So it's a cleaner, happier society with fewer people in jail and
But
better
also a
recovery.
smaller society. I'm wondering, if I were to play devil's advocate, that perhaps this is something that might work in a small, close-knit society.
This is definitely a product of being a smaller society. But what's true for a smaller society can't be said to be untrue for a larger society. If an addict is somebody who needs health intervention and treatment, that's not going to change just because you have a population of UP, right? It's still, the problem is still the same. Your governance might have to be done in smaller units, and that's a whole different conversation. But the solution that we have under the NDPS Act is definitely not the solution, and we see it. It perverts everything about drug use, about the criminal justice system. It's not doing anything that it's supposed to do.
So let's come back to the NDPS Act. So Naveed, can you tell us a little bit about why India decided to enact the NDPS Act? Because given the socio-cultural practices that we discussed, given the widespread usage of this, and the fact that 3 crore people are using it, and you really can't put 3 crore people in jail, why did India enact the NDPS Act in the first place?
Basically, in 1880s, the British government, there were a few questions asked in the parliament by some temperance advocates to the British government at that time, that what was their position with regards to with regard to cannabis use in India. And this prompted the British government at that time to set up this Indian Hemp Drugs Commission in 1893. Now, this commission looked into the prevalence of cannabis use in India, and if the British could come in and regulate it to some extent, or even go ahead and prohibit it. They decided that it was not feasible. Cannabis use was very prevalent in India, and it was not harmful physically or mentally or in general to the health of the society. So they decided against it. During the freedom movement, also there was not a uniform perception about how we go about it, with drug use. So we had certain localized provincial laws that would regulate cannabis and opium and other drugs, but nothing to criminalize cannabis use. It was suddenly in the mid 20th century when America began to prosecute individuals for smoking up cannabis. Now, this was attributed at that time even by government servants and by the public at large to the African American community and the Hispanic community in America. And this prompted a very rabid racist propaganda against the racial minorities in America. And you had the Anti-Narcotics Act in place, the Anti-Opium Act in place, and America began to influence international perception about drug use. It had presence in Philippines at that time, and it could alter how opium trade happened between China and Britain. And one thing followed after the other, and this led to the 1961 Convention on Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances. India, being a signatory to this convention on narcotic drugs, had to impose prohibition within India on any non-medical or non-scientific use of cannabis. And the convention came in 1961. We took our time, and only in 1985 did we criminalize consumption of cannabis.
Okay, so that's a very useful history, because it tells me that, one, there is of course considerable American pressure which has been the basis for India passing the NDPS Act. But also I would imagine that there would be some degree of local support, because it's not as if everyone in India is happy with decriminalizing drugs. I remember there were some very interesting debates in the Indian Parliament when the NDPS Act was enacted. Neha, you want to?
So from what I read around the debates on the NDPS Act, there wasn't any consensus on criminalizing cannabis. Nobody actually wanted to criminalize cannabis. It was very clear that it was being pushed on them because the convention said so. So there was no question about doing it, because they were a signatory to this convention. But the reason you don't have bhang within the NDPS Act is because the parliamentarians got a little bit of a way around, and they managed to carve this exception because bhang is so intrinsic to Hindu religion. So if you're saying that was there any sort of any support for criminalization of marijuana, I did not find it. They were largely opposed to it, in fact, quite vociferously.
So it seems to me that the reason why we criminalized cannabis use was because it was forced on us. We didn't want to do it, but there wasn't enough political will to oppose that force. So that seems perhaps fertile ground for at least a debate on decriminalization of cannabis. Now, you have advocated in your report that cannabis use should be decriminalized, but you have also pointed out that decriminalization is different from making cannabis use legal. Now, this is a difference that I didn't very clearly understand. So, could you explain it to everybody, please?
We advocate for decriminalization, which simply means that consumption of cannabis will no longer be a criminal offense. You cannot be sent to jail for consuming cannabis. Legalization will make the whole process, from cultivation to sale to consumption, everything legal. The reason why we don't advocate for legalization is because you have to have proper structures in mind that would enable legalization. Who will own the modes of production? Who will be selling it? Will it be a government shop? Will it be private enterprises? And this is particularly important because in the US, we're seeing private ownership take over legalization, and these companies, which profit motive means that you have gummy bears and you have these lollies, and young kids are using marijuana and having effects of overconsumption, and you see ERs being filled with young people who have taken too much marijuana because they don't know how much to take. And that's typical of private enterprises entering any arena. So in India, until we know how it's going to be sold, who is going to be producing it, we shouldn't be actually advocating for legalization, which is why we have stuck to decriminalization at this point, just so that people don't have to enter the criminal justice system because of this consumption.
Okay, so it's basically targeted at the small user so that they are not branded criminals because they've smoked a little bit of ganja. So,
Correct.
Naveen, will this make India an outlier again in terms of the fact that is this the global norm now? Is the world moving towards this kind of decriminalization? Because what Neha said, if some states in the US are allowing this and people are smoking this, and US, which is really the leader of the war on drugs in the world. So, if India does take this step, will it be an outlier or will it be following a norm that is becoming increasingly the global norm?
I think US is still dominating the discourse around this because uh, in the past century, the US started off by criminalizing consumption of cannabis and then moved on to legalizing it for medical use. And in the early 2000s, decriminalizing it. And now you have around 11 states in the US which have legalized consumption of cannabis for personal use. There's US where you can grow a few plants for yourself. You can have on you a few grams for your personal consumption, and around 26 states in the US which have decriminalized any kind of personal consumption of cannabis. There are other countries like Belgium and where cannabis use has been decriminalized. In Canada, cannabis use has been decriminalized. Uh, Portugal is interesting because Portugal still has an administrative penalty associated with cannabis. So there are models in place where you can understand how even decriminalization has to work. It does not necessarily mean that a law does not have any way out and people can go about smoking cannabis. There can still be some sort of a control. There can still be an administrative penalty, a fine.
What is an administrative penalty?
A fine, something like a traffic challan.
Right. So, you recommend something like that in India, or you're saying do nothing?
At least it's it could be a start from putting people into jails and looking at an administrative penalty to start off with.
So clearly, it seems that what you have in mind is an incremental move away from this mass incarceration that currently seems to be happening. So, just if you had a crystal ball and you were gazing into it, if cannabis is indeed decriminalized, do you see this as the beginning of a larger movement towards decriminalization of drugs itself? Neha, your previous study in Punjab showed that poppy husk is consumed very widely, mostly by farmers. Who it's very unlikely that any government will put in prison. So should that be the next to go, or do you think that it's cannabis and then we stop this?
If you're asking me what I would like to happen, I would like that to happen. If it's about staring into a crystal ball, I think we will stop at marijuana. because I think the opposition that we will have to decriminalization of all drug use is, but other drugs are more harmful, but other drugs ruin youths. This is even during debates in the parliament, everybody talks about brown sugar. Brown sugar and children. It's such a huge part of the narrative, and this is also a definite problem in Delhi.
Yeah,
Brown sugar.
when I was growing up, this brown sugar was a bad word. And then now I go to Starbucks and keep asking for brown sugar. I don't know, something seems to have changed very
Drugs
radically in these 30 years.
the street name for drugs keep changing, right? You'll have Molly, someday it'll become something else, something. So brown sugar, I think, is no
So
longer a used.
what was brown sugar? Sorry, I really don't know.
That's like, I think, leftover of heroin, the crude form of heroin. That's brown sugar. So I don't know what it's called today. I forget.
Garda. I think it's Garda.
In English, I don't remember what it's called, but it's, so like if you have a gram of heroin for about 4,000 rupees, this will be for about 150, 200 rupees. So it's a huge problem among street children in Delhi for sure. And I'm guessing across the country. But what happens when you start talking about decriminalization is that the first response is, but it's terrible for people. And that's precisely why it should be decriminalized, because it's terrible for people. And sending them to jail does not make it better for people. But I doubt anybody is listening to reason.
Okay, so you are not optimistic about drugs generally being decriminalized, but you are cautiously optimistic about cannabis use being decriminalized.
Absolutely. Also, because let Naveed take this, because I think he's read up more on this. India has recently voted against or voted in favor of marking down cannabis as a class 5 drug, I think, or a class 6 drug, whatever. Basically, India agrees that cannabis is not as harmful as other drugs and shouldn't be in the same schedule. The very schedule in 1961 that forced us to enact the NDPS Act is no longer in existence. So, or at least cannabis in that is no longer in existence. So if India is voting in that favor internationally, hopefully nationally also, domestically also, it should follow through.
So Naveed, last word to you. India is voting to do away with cannabis criminalization internationally, but the NCB in Bombay is going after small comedians for 10 grams of cannabis. Where do you see the penny finally dropping?
I think with the UN's move to remove cannabis from Schedule 4 of the convention, they have opened up the debate on cannabis being medically about the cannabis's medical use, and I think it's inevitable that we will move towards legalization of cannabis today, tomorrow, or whenever. But decriminalization should happen now, because it's pushing too many people into the jails and it's overburdening our criminal justice system, be it police, be it the courts, be it the jails.
All right, we leave it there. For anyone who's interested, do check out the report that Neha and Naveed have come up with. It's very short and easy to read, and we'll share the link of that as in the notes. So thanks very much, Neha and Naveed, for joining us. I think we can be cautiously optimistic that cannabis use will be decriminalized, and the poor who are in jail more than the Bollywood stars for using cannabis will hopefully no longer be so. Thanks very much for joining us. But that's not the end of the show for you. We still have Clatter, our legal quiz that's a bit tougher than Clat, and in this edition, a little more interesting. But last episode's answer, you'd remember that the question was, this major political leader founded one of India's first communist trade unions. In 1928, he led the union's first major strike in a textile mill. Ambedkar suggested that one of the issues that ought to be raised was equality and entitlement within the ranks of workers. This gentleman, however, did not agree, and this led to a long and bitter falling out, including one of the reasons for Ambedkar losing the 1952 general election. Who is this major political leader? And the answer was S.A. Dange. We had many right answers, but I'm delighted to say that the winner is Mohan Gowda. Mohan had given the right answer for several of the Clatter quizzes in season 1, and I'm delighted Mohan has won again. Congratulations very much, Mohan. A gift is on your way. This week, since it's an episode on drugs, we've taken some liberties and created Clatter with a difference. It's a quiz, but it doesn't stop there. The two answers rhyme with each other. You have to make a couplet with the rhyming words. The best couplet with the rhyming words is the winner. So here are the two questions. Here are two quiz questions which you have to get answers to. The answers are rhyming with each other. The best couplet with the rhyming answers wins. First question. What is the Spanish word for assassin? Also a notable Hollywood film where the FBI busts a drug cartel. That's question one. Question two. Named after the patron saint of the Basque region of Spain, this 14-time Grand Slam tennis winner was best known for her duels with Steffi Graf and, rather interestingly, for keeping the spare tennis ball not in her pocket but in a cup holder at the back of her skirt. Who are we talking about? The two answers rhyme with each other. Get the two answers and come up with an interesting couplet, and you get a 1,000 rupee gift voucher. So thanks very much for joining us for this episode on war on weed. As we found out from this episode, as Neha and Naveed said, bhang is completely legal. So perhaps some bhang might help before composing the couplet. Though the number that I'm going to play for you was composed by R.D. Burman without bhang, but it's still an all-time cult classic. Enjoy the song and see you next week. Adjourned.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, follow us on Twitter at Vidhi_India for regular updates. We are on SoundCloud and Spotify as Vidhi Center for Legal Policies podcast. You can also listen to us on Google Podcasts or iTunes. Email us at justify@vidhilegalpolicy.in to share your comments and feedback on this episode.